So yesterday I was speaking with a colleague of mine who's also a professional speaker, and she was telling me how excited she was that she finally memorized her presentation from beginning to end, every word. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked her, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to memorize your presentation? And she said it was because she wanted to make sure she delivered every point perfectly. Every sentence, every idea, every joke, every story delivered as it should be. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I said to her, I think that's the wrong approach to memorize your presentation. And she asked why. And I thought, well, in answering her question, I thought I'd also share some ideas with you because some speakers do feel that they have to memorize their presentation. So why shouldn't you? Well, first off, it's not really about speaking, even though you're on stage essentially doing that. It's really about communicating, having a conversation with the audience. Even though they're not going to talk back, they are going to interact with you with regards to how they feel and how they think and how they respond, whether they laugh, they cry, they get mad, whatever it is. It is essentially a conversation, and people don't memorize conversations. Second of all, if you memorize your lines and you repeat them back, well, unless you're a really good actor, it's going to sound like you've memorized your lines. And most speakers are not good actors. That's why they're speakers and not actors. If you talk naturally and just say things as they should be said, well, it'll sound more natural. As well, you might experience brain freeze. That's it. If you're up there and something happens, something throws you off, somebody sneezes in the audience, a cell phone starts ringing, whatever it might be, and it throws you off, all of a sudden, you've forgotten your lines. What do? Total silence. You can't remember where you were or what the next line is. Big problem. And of course, if you can't speak your whole hour, so let's say you have an hour to speak and you can't speak that whole hour, they tell you, sorry, we can only give you 45 minutes. Well, what do you cut? See, because your presentation isn't fluid anymore. It's memorized. It's structured. You have to follow every word or it'll mess you up. So you're not able to adapt the presentation. You don't know what points to pull out or leave out or not to say, or maybe even adding some time. If they tell you instead of an hour, we're going to give you an hour and 15 minutes because the person before you wasn't long enough. Well, how do you add additional time if you've memorized? And then finally, you do want to interact somewhat with the audience. So if you make a really funny joke and they're all laughing, well, you might want to build on that joke for a couple minutes before moving on to your next idea. But if you've memorized your lines, if you've memorized every part of your presentation, you haven't given yourself that ability to be flexible, to kind of respond to the audience, how they act towards what you're saying. So my advice would be this. Don't put that pressure on yourself to memorize your presentation. Instead, view your presentation as you telling a bunch of stories. So just, for example, think about something that happened to you the other day, something that you may have shared with someone else. So you told that story to someone else. Now, if you were to tell that story again to another person, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't tell it exactly the same way, word for word, but you'd still tell it in a way that conveyed the points that you wanted to make. That's how great speakers share ideas. It's not the same thing word for word every time. They'll sometimes leave parts out, sometimes add a little part, sometimes embellish something. Whatever it might be, they're trying to create a connection with the audience, as should you. So instead of worrying about every word, start thinking about every idea, every point you want to make. What's the moral of the story? Why should you care? If you focus on that, it'll be a more natural delivery. You won't worry about having to mess up any lines because there won't be any lines. And here's the thing too, by the way. If you leave something out, it won't matter because nobody knows that you were supposed to say it. So instead of delivering lines, well, just deliver stories and ideas and let the audience take it in as they will.